Welcome to another journey through history. Every great civilization has a beginning. Some begin with a great king. Some begin with a great battle. But one of the greatest civilizations in human history began with a river. A river that has flowed for thousands of years. A river that gave life to an entire nation. A river that still amazes historians and scientists today. This is the incredible story of the mighty Nile River. The Nile is much more than a river. It is one of the oldest rivers on Earth. It is also one of the longest. Its total length is about 6,650 kilometers. The river begins in the heart of Africa. It flows across 11 modern countries. Finally, it reaches the Mediterranean Sea. For more than 5,000 years, people have lived along its banks. Their lives have always depended on this river. But the Nile is not famous only because of its size. It is famous because it changed history. Without the Nile, ancient Egypt would never have become a great civilization. There would be no fertile farms. There would be no mighty pyramids. There would be no powerful pharaohs. Everything began with this single river. That is why many historians call it the most important river in human history. For thousands of years, one question puzzled the world. Where does the Nile begin? Today, we can find the answer on a map. But long ago, nobody knew. People could see the river. They could sail on it. They could drink its water. Yet its true source remained one of history's greatest mysteries. Around 450 BC, the famous Greek historian Herodotus traveled through Egypt. He carefully studied the people, their culture, and the Nile. After his journey, he wrote one sentence that became famous across the world. Egypt is the gift of the Nile. Even after more than 2,400 years, people still remember those words. But there was one thing Herodotus could not explain. Where did the Nile really begin? The mystery fascinated many people. Greek scholars discussed it. Roman emperors wanted the answer. They sent brave explorers into unknown lands. The explorers crossed thick forests. They traveled through dangerous swamps. They climbed mountains. Many became sick. Some never returned. For centuries, the source of the Nile remained one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. The answer finally became clearer during the 19th century. European explorers traveled deep into East Africa. There, they discovered something surprising. The Nile does not begin from one single river. It has two great branches. The first is the White Nile. The second is the Blue Nile. Together, they create the mighty Nile. The White Nile begins near Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. Early explorers were amazed by its size. Some even thought it was an inland sea. The White Nile travels slowly. It crosses lakes, forests, and wide grasslands. Its journey continues for thousands of kilometers before meeting the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile begins at Lake Tana in the highlands of Ethiopia. Although it is shorter than the White Nile, it plays a much bigger role. Every year, heavy seasonal rains fill the river. It carries rich black soil across the land. In fact, nearly 85% of the Nile's water and fertile silt come from the Blue Nile. Without it, Egypt's fertile fields would never have existed. The White Nile and the Blue Nile finally meet at Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. From this point, they become one great river. The Nile then begins its long journey through the desert. It continues north for thousands of kilometers. Finally, it reaches the Mediterranean Sea. Very few rivers in the world have such an extraordinary journey. There is another surprising fact about the Nile. Most people think rivers flow from north to south. The Nile does exactly the opposite. It flows from south to north. The reason is simple. The river begins in the highlands of East Africa. The Mediterranean Sea lies at a much lower level. Water always flows from higher ground to lower ground. Nature follows its own rules. As the Nile enters Egypt, the landscape changes dramatically. On both sides of the river, the land becomes green and fertile. Beyond this narrow strip of green lies endless desert. More than 95% of Egypt is dry desert. Without the Nile, Egypt would have remained an empty land of sand. The greatest story of the Nile was only just beginning. In the next chapter, we will discover how this remarkable river gave birth to one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. Every year, the Nile followed the same pattern. During the summer months, Heavy rains fell over the Ethiopian highlands. The Blue Nile carried this water towards Egypt. Soon, the river overflowed its banks. Today, floods often bring fear. But for the ancient Egyptians, the Nile's flood was a season of hope. They waited for it with excitement, because they knew something wonderful would happen after the water disappeared. When the floodwaters slowly went down, they left behind a layer of rich black soil. This soil was called silt. It was soft. It was fertile. It was perfect for farming. The ancient Egyptians grew wheat, barley, vegetables, fruits, and flax. These crops fed millions of people. Year after year, the Nile turned dry desert into productive farmland. No other river gave such a valuable gift. Because of the Nile, people no longer needed to move from place to place. They built permanent villages. Later, those villages became towns. The towns became powerful cities. Families lived together. Farmers produced more food than they needed. Trade began to grow. Step by step, a great civilization was born. Everything depended on one river. The ancient Egyptians respected the Nile more than any king. They believed the river was a gift from the gods. They worshipped Hapi, the god of the annual flood. Every year, when the river overflowed, people celebrated festivals. They offered flowers, grain, fruits, and valuable gifts. For them, the Nile was not simply water. It was the source of life itself. Around 3100 BC, King Nama, also known as Men's, united Upper and Lower Egypt. This marked the beginning of one of history's greatest civilizations. The Nile became the kingdom's main road. Boats carried people from one city to another. Merchants carried food, stone, wood, and precious goods. The river connected the entire kingdom. Without the Nile, such a large kingdom could never have existed. Many people wonder how the ancient Egyptians built the Great Pyramids. The answer begins with the Nile. The huge limestone and granite blocks did not move by themselves. Scientists believe workers carried these heavy stones on large boats. The boats traveled along branches of the Nile. During the flood season, the water reached much closer to the building sites. The river became the greatest transport system of the ancient world. The most famous pyramid is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built around 2560 BC for Pharaoh Khufu. It originally stood about 146 meters tall. For nearly 3,800 years, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth. Thousands of workers helped build it. The Nile carried many of the stones they needed. Once again, the river made the impossible possible. The Nile also helped the Egyptians understand time. The floods arrived almost every year at the same season. People carefully watched the river. They observed the stars. They studied the sky. Slowly, they created one of the world's earliest calendars. It contained 365 days. This calendar helped farmers know the right time to plant and harvest their crops. The Nile inspired more than farming. It also encouraged mathematics and engineering. Farmers needed to measure their fields after every flood. Engineers built canals to carry water across the land. Workers designed dams and storage ponds. Every new challenge taught them new skills. In many ways, the Nile became their greatest teacher. Life along the Nile was beautiful, but it was never completely safe. The river was home to one of Africa's most powerful predators, the Nile crocodile. Some crocodiles grow nearly 6 meters long. They can weigh more than 1,000 kilograms. The ancient Egyptians even worshipped a crocodile god named Sobek, who represented strength and protection. Another dangerous animal lived in the Nile, the hippopotamus. It may look slow and gentle, but appearances can be misleading. A hippopotamus can run at speeds of about 30 kilometers per hour. It can easily overturn small boats. Even today, it is considered one of Africa's most dangerous wild animals. Life beside the Nile always demanded courage. The Nile was full of life. It was home to hundreds of species of fish and birds. One of its largest fish is the Nile perch. Some grow more than 2 meters long and weigh over 200 kilograms. For thousands of years, the river has supported an extraordinary ecosystem. But the Nile still hides many mysteries. Some of them continue to puzzle scientists even today. Let's discover those mysteries in the next chapter. For thousands of years, people believe they know the Nile. But the river still keeps many secrets. Even today, scientists continue to study it. The first mystery is surprising. Where does the Nile really begin? The answer is not as simple as many people think. Even in the 21st century, experts still debate its true source. Some scientists say the river begins in Burundi. Others believe the true source lies in Rwanda or Tanzania. In 2006, one research team announced that it had discovered the real starting point. But in 2022, another team identified a different location. The debate continues. One of the world's greatest rivers still refuses to reveal all its secrets. Here is another amazing mystery. Millions of years ago, the Nile almost disappeared. Scientists believe that about 5.5 million years ago, the Mediterranean Sea nearly dried up during an event called the Messinian salinity crisis. As the sea disappeared, the Nile also changed dramatically. For a long time, the river became a deep valley instead of the mighty waterway we know today. Nature slowly rebuilt it over millions of years. The Nile also hides secrets beneath its surface. In some places, the river reaches a depth of about 26 meters. Archaeologists believe that many ancient objects still lie beneath the water. Old boats, stone statues, temple remains, ancient tools, perhaps even forgotten treasures. Every new discovery helps us understand another piece of Egypt's long history. The Nile is more than a river. For thousands of years, it serves as one of the world's greatest trade routes. Boats carry gold, ivory, grain, papyrus, cloth, spices, and many other valuable goods. Merchants travel between Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and regions beyond. Later, trade reaches Greece, Rome, and parts of Asia. The Nile connects civilizations long before modern roads exist. The importance of the Nile continues to grow. Today, Cairo, the capital of Egypt, stands proudly on its banks. More than 100 million Egyptians depend on the Nile for drinking water, farming, industry, and daily life. Just as the river supports the ancient kingdom, it continues to support the modern nation. The story of the Nile is far from over. In 1970, Egypt completes one of the greatest engineering projects in its history. The country builds the Aswan High Dam. The dam stands about 111 meters high. Behind it forms Lake Nasser, one of the world's largest artificial lakes. The dam controls floods. It stores water. It produces electricity. Today, it supplies a large part of Egypt's power needs. But every great achievement brings new challenges. Before the dam, the Nile carries fertile black silt to Egypt every year. After the dam is built, most of that silt remains trapped behind it. Farmers now depend more on chemical fertilizers. The fertile soil that once arrives naturally becomes much harder to replace. Nature begins to change in unexpected ways. The dam creates another difficult problem. Several ancient temples face the danger of disappearing beneath the rising water. One of them is the magnificent Abu Simbel Temple, built by Pharaoh Ramesses II. In an extraordinary international effort led by UNESCO, engineers carefully cut the entire temple into large blocks. Then they move it to higher ground and rebuild it piece by piece. It becomes one of the greatest rescue projects in archaeological history. Today, the Nile continues to shape international politics. Several countries share its water. Each nation depends on it in a different way. As populations grow, the demand for water also increases. Large dams and new development projects create fresh challenges. The Nile reminds us that water is not only a natural resource. It is also a shared responsibility. Before we end our journey, here are a few fascinating facts. The Nile carries millions of tons of fertile soil every year. Its great delta is so large that astronauts can easily see it from space. The ancient Egyptians make papyrus, one of the world's earliest writing materials, from plants growing along its banks. Even today, hundreds of archaeological sites continue to reveal new discoveries beside this remarkable river. History is still waiting to be uncovered. For more than 5,000 years, the Nile has given life, food, knowledge, and hope to millions of people. It helps build one of the greatest civilizations in human history. It continues to support modern Egypt today. The Nile is not just a river. It is a living witness to history. As long as the Nile flows, its story will continue. Thank you for joining today's journey through history. Until our next adventure, keep learning, keep wondering, and keep discovering the incredible stories that shape our world.